Yeah,
We did talk about Syria in this conversation, but I want to talk about the current situation in Syria that's been unfolding over the last few months, specifically affecting Christians. Since the fall of the Assad regime in December 8th, 2024, um, many of our people were overcome with joy, and for good reason, and many of our people were very scared, also
yeah.
with good reason. Under the Assad regime, we were persecuted, you could say, as an ethnic community, as a linguistic community. And now, under this new regime, the Islamist regime of HTS and Jolani, we are persecuted and will be persecuted more intensely as time goes on as a faith community, as Christians. And this is yet another manifestation of the fact that we're always caught in the middle, right? So it was after the Ottoman Empire, after the Saifo, that Islamist nationalism started to rise, and so Christians and many others introduced secular Arabism to keep
Mhm.
Islamism under wraps. But of course, that became more out of control and more radical than initially expected. With the fall of the Assad regime, um, he committed very many sins against us, the Arabist governments, right? They squashed the Syriac Renaissance and
Yeah,
in the mid 20th century, and now we're facing something very different and arguably more intense on the horizon. Because this HTS group who took over the transitional government in Syria, they're not what the Western media portrays them to be. In the Western media, oftentimes you'll see them as the saviors. They overthrew Bashar al-Assad, which is true, but what they're capable of and what they do have in their plans, given their religious and ideological foundation, is very frightening. In the last couple of weeks, we saw a mass slaughter, a massacre of Alawites as well as Christians in
mhm.
Syria. And this is just a sneak peek. This is just the beginning, because once they solidify power, once they gain the trust of the West by talking sweet words and political gesturing, as they secure their reputation, it's going to become more intense. And once they're done with the Alawites, they're going to look toward the Christians.
For
And this is
sure.
something that we need to be ready for. So I just want to be sure to make that point very clear, because it's important that people understand this.
That's a very good point. And I read actually today that I think the Western countries um, have decided to give more than 5 billion euro to Syria to support the new government, which is uh, I don't know what to think about that. Yeah, it looks very naive from the Western world, but I don't know how they will give them, what conditions they will put, etc. Maybe it's even good for the minorities in Syria, so that there's more pressure on the HTS. So I'm not in the details, but I read it today and I was surprised because uh, just few days ago we heard about the, let's say, the murdering, mass murdering of especially Alawites, but also Christians, which has a, a huge dimension. It's very difficult to know how many exactly, because the sources are, you don't know how much, how
Yeah.
reliable they are. Nowadays it's really difficult, and the mainstream media does, or at least in the what I saw, is not that interested in this topic right now, which is very bizarre.
Well, right now the Western world is still so excited. They're drunk on the news that Bashar al-Assad has been overthrown. So they want to just ride this wave of excitement rather than asking the real question: who is replacing him? What is their ideology? What is their history? So it's not just a matter of ideology; it's a matter of demonstrated history. What they did during the Syrian civil war in Syria and also in Iraq. Jolani, the leader of this group, he was an ISIS leader. He was an
Yeah,
Al Qaeda leader. Um, so this is very important. What we at IDC are doing, what we're advocating for, you mentioned Europe gave nearly $6 billion to the Syrian transitional government. What we're advocating for in the United States is over the last several years, when the United States government has imposed sanctions on Syria, it was not the Syrian government that was suffering. Assad was still living in his mansions, driving his Ferraris and Lamborghinis. It was the Syrian people, Christians and other people, who
Yeah.
were suffering. It was normal, everyday people. So, what we're advocating for in the United States, IDC, is to provide relief of sanctions so that the people can live, the people can breathe, the people can eat, take care of their families, but keep the pressure on the new transitional government, because they need to know that we're not going to accept anything they try to pull off, right? They need to know that our eyes are watching, we are interested in their next steps. So this is what we're advocating for here in the United States.
Mhm. I heard an interview with J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. It was just a small, just 2 minutes interview, which I heard. Of course, the interview was longer, but I heard just 2 minutes of that, where he said, regarding Syria, he said, okay, in Iraq, we have seen um, that the number of the Christians in Iraq after 2003, when US went into Iraq, it was around 2 million Christians. Today, I don't know, maybe 10% of that number we still have, but it's like it, it, the Christians are more or less gone,
Yeah.
eradicated from Iraq. And he said we have to learn from that example and do whatever we can so that it, in Syria will not happen the same. So
Yeah.
this was very. I was very happy to hear that
Yeah.
from the vice president of the US, because in Europe I didn't hear that from any politicians
Yeah.
so specifically. So this gives me hope. Do you share this hope, and what can we expect from the US government in this regard?
Yeah, I share your optimism, because one thing I can say, and let me first say, IDC is not a political organization. We're not
Yeah.
Republican. We're not Democrat. We're advocates, right? But one thing I can say is that what we saw from the Biden administration was very disappointing. What we're seeing thus far, and it's very early still, but what we're seeing thus far from the Trump administration is a lot more encouraging. Um, we're seeing, as you mentioned, Vice President J.D. Vance making a strong statement in support and in concern for Christians of the Middle East, particularly in Syria in this case. Also, in recent days, we've seen Secretary of State Marco Rubio make a very
Mhm.
strong statement uh, uh, expressing his concern for Christians in the Middle East. And President Trump has always cared, even during the first Trump administration, he's made Christians in the Middle East and religious freedom a foreign policy priority. Um, President Trump is a manager, he's a leader, he rallies his own team of experts, but he himself is not an expert. JD
Mhm.
Vance is a strong Christian. Marco Rubio not only is a strong Christian, but he's a foreign policy expert. And to hear these people speaking in such terms is very encouraging, because President Trump understands that he is not an expert, and he is certainly not too proud to rely on his experts like Marco Rubio and JD Vance. So we're very encouraged by this. We are making efforts to advocate among the administration, Secretary of State Rubio and the Vice President as well. But we know they're on our side, so it's a matter of leveraging them and using them to win the support of other members of the administration, including the President. So I share your optimism.
Okay, I'm looking. I'm very curious what the US will do, because, to be frankly, I think US is the power who has much more influence than all European countries combined. Even Syria is much closer geographically to Europe, but still,
Mhm.
what the US is doing or saying has much more influence than what Europe is doing and saying.
And
So
we
this
hope
is.
we have a positive influence here in the United States, because the United States has a history of having, let's say, good intentions, but sometimes those good intentions lead to negative outcomes. In the case of Iraq, for example.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's a matter of managing the response, not just responding, in a reactive way, but managing the response and doing it in a wise and planned out way. I don't think President Trump is going to physically go into Syria, which I think is good, but I think he's going to rely on diplomatic means, economic means, and we hope that has effective outcomes.
Okay. Perfect. Let's go maybe to Iraq. Yeah.
Yeah.
In Iraq, we see some, at least in North Iraq, in the Kurdistan region, let's say in Kurdish region, we say some promising developments. You had in your podcast, you had like the Mr. What was his name? From Anno Abdul Masih Abduka, right? As a guest, and you had also from the Zurich Cultural Organization, Mr. Kaldo Ramzi. Uh, I heard your podcast. It was very encouraging to see that they are very active within the society, and they have a voice within the society, and they have also own educational system, etc. How do you see the situation in North Iraq right now, or in Iraq in general, but especially in North Iraq?
In Iraq in general, it's a very grim situation, as you mentioned a moment ago, Andros. The numbers have gone down from uh, 1.5 to 2 million
Yeah.
20 years ago, let's say, down to less than 150,000 by many estimates. Again, we don't have census, we don't have numbers, but about 150,000. So it doesn't look good. It's a very grim situation. However, in the north, in the KRG region, the Kurdistan Regional Government, um, things are looking a little bit more stable. Whether or not the future looks bright is a different conversation, but it looks stable. The KRG has provided a number of things for our people. One is, as you mentioned, Anu Abdoka. He is a minister in the KRG government. He's the minister of transportation and communication. So he's a Christian in the central government, or excuse me, in the KRG government. But also the KRG has provided the Christians with what is known as it's just below the ministry level. It's a directorate. It's the Directorate of Syriac Heritage and Culture. We have our own museum, a museum of Syriac culture and heritage in Ankawa. So these signals, these developments are very encouraging. The fact that we have some kind of stability and we have a government that is helping us, working with us on our side. You have many critics from within our people, both Iraq and
Yeah.
in the diaspora, saying that the KRG has bad intentions, and they cite many examples of this. And I don't deny that those exist, but we must step back and look at we have an example in English, a saying, step back and look at the whole forest and don't focus on a single tree, because you'll miss the whole forest.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the same thing. So I do see some encouraging signals happening in northern Iraq for our people. Yes.
Okay. Do you see also some kind of self-governant province or something in the North Iraq, that this could be also an option?
It's always an option, certainly, but one must look at the political reality currently, and then
Yeah.
once you look at the current political reality, then we must assess, okay, what would be required in order to make that realistic and a reality. Right now, the Ninua Plain, which is oftentimes used as the location for the autonomous region, the Ninua Plain right now is occupied by Iranian militias, Hishd Shabi and other Iranian proxies. Even you may have heard, or if not, I'll let you know, there is a so-called Christian party. It's not, it doesn't represent Christians, but it's led by a Christian person, by Rayan al-Kildani. He heads up what's known as the Babylon Brigade, which is a militia, a supposedly
Okay.
Chaldean militia, but it's not. It's actually sponsored by Iran. It's armed by
Okay.
Iran. It's trained by Iran, and it's used by Iran for its political objectives in
Okay.
northern Iraq. It's a Christian party. It's a Christian militia in name only, but it's really an Iranian militia. This
And the
party,
members
the
are
Babylon.
also Shia then.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
This Iranian party that calls itself a Christian party, it's called the Babylon Movement. The Babylon Brigade is the militia. The Babylon Movement has taken parliamentary seats that are given to Christians. They're reserved specifically for Christians. It's a Christian quota in parliament.
Mhm.
They take these seats and they say, okay, we are Christians, we are here, but really they're Iranian puppets, unfortunately. And so this is the reality on the ground in the Nineveh plain right now. You have Iranian militias, and then you have Christian militias who serve Iran. So any autonomous attempt will be quickly squashed by Iran and taken over as an Iranian movement. I mean, they're already there they have semi-autonomy there already, the Iranians. That's the grim reality. Since the ISIS genocide, when all of the
Yeah.
Christians, Syriac Assyrian Chaldeans, left the Nineveh plain and they found safety in Ankawa and Erbil. 10 years later, here we are in 2025, they still haven't returned. A vast majority are still in Ankawa. They are not in the Nineveh plain for this reason alone. When you go to the Nineveh plain, you see banners all over the street and signs of the Iranian Ayatollah. And this is a
Okay.
sad reality, and this is something that IDC is also making the West aware of as well.